How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's 49ers Cross-Examination. I'm joined by Alain Poupart, the publisher of all of the Miami Dolphins on SI. We've been colleagues for 4 or 5 years through so many different iterations of our company, but it's Miami Dolphins on SI. I'm Grant Cohn with 49ers on SI, and usually I would bring on Alain and ask him questions like, what are the Dolphins' strengths? What are the Dolphins' weaknesses? I mean, both of these teams are kind of out of it, so I'm going to ask bigger picture questions. And what's interesting about the Dolphins to me is they're like a sister team of the Niners almost. I mean, they're kind of built in the Niners image. Mike McDaniel came from over here. And they're almost like the Niners in the future because they already paid Tua. And Tua's a lot like Brock Purdy. And my question is, do the Dolphins already regret the Tua extension, which they gave out a few months ago?
Yeah. No, I don't think they do, because I think, again, they really are, what's what I'm looking for? I don't want to say enthralled, but they're like really locked into the nucleus that they have, which consists of Tua, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mike McDaniel calling the shots. And all of those guys got new contracts, either in the extensions or, in the case of Tyreek Hill, a restructuring where money was moved up front and some more money was guaranteed. So I think they're looking at this year with their 6-8 record as more of an aberration, that if they just make some tweaks here and there, they can run it back with the same group and have results that would be more like what they were last year, when they were 11-4 heading into week 17 at Baltimore with a shot to get the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs.
That's what they're holding on to.
The problem with that, though, is that last year, as this year, and the year before that, whatever their record was, whatever offensive numbers they were putting up, and when it's good, it's really good, i.e. 70-20 against Denver, whenever they come up against some resistance, particularly in December, and resistance, I mean good teams, that offense, that prolific, explosive offense, is nowhere to be found.
Okay, so they're telling themselves as an aberration. Niners doing the exact same thing. It's funny how 6-8 teams lie to themselves sometimes. Maybe they're not. We'll find out next year. As someone who's been covering Tua and the Dolphins and seen this play out, again, they're about a year ahead of the Niners because they haven't paid Purdy yet. What would you say to 49ers fans who are really eager to give Purdy, to make him the highest paid player in the league, or just don't know what the Niners should do? What advice, words of wisdom can you give to this franchise? They're on the verge of a pivotal decision.
I know, to be careful what you wish for. And in the case of the Dolphins, the pushback I got, because I advocated along for the Dolphins to make him play on the 5th-year option, because on top of the health considerations you had with Tua, which are not as a factor with Purdy, is what's the ceiling there? And the pushback I got is always, well, who else are you going to get? Well, I don't know who else I'm going to get, but right now I do know that until proven otherwise, Tua's never going to be any more than 6th or 7th best QB in the AFC, because he's not as good as Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes. I would throw in Justin Herbert in that equation. I think CJ Stroud's a better quarterback. So
yeah,
even if for a year I'm going to have quarterbacking that's not going to be as good as Tua, the goal ultimately is to get somebody who can compete with those other guys, where sure, you can win a Super Bowl with Tua, just like you can win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy, as close as the 49ers got last year, but you better have your margins for error around your quarterback is greatly reduced. You know, the more questionable your quarterback is. I don't want questionable is not the right word, but the less perfect your quarterback is.
Yeah, I mean, you may or may not be able to win a Super Bowl with Tua. I mean, he hasn't proven it, right? He struggles when it's cold. Purdy struggles when it's raining or snowing. Maybe you can. I mean, Purdy came close, but the question is, can you do it when they're making all that money? And I think you're seeing with the Dolphins, with Tua making this much money, the rest of the team isn't quite what it was. I don't know. How is that? Has that contract not really affected the roster yet?
No, not yet, because this year's cap number is like $9 million. It jumps up next year. It's $39 million, and the year after that is like 56. Yeah. So they structured it so where this year, but they have other guys who have. I didn't mean to.
Oh my God!
What?
39 next year?
Yeah.
Whew. That's not gonna go well, Alan. Spoiler. I don't cover this team, but I don't think it's gonna go well. Oh my
That's what they
goodness.
did. I mean, they dove. He was their guy. They said it all along in the offseason. Tua's our guy. We're excited about his future and all that. And again, if you look strictly, if you're a stat watcher, well, 2 years ago he led the NFL in passer rating. Last year he led the NFL in passing yards, and this year his passer rating is again over 100. But if you watch the games and you understand that passer rating, it measures strictly the end result of the play. And for example, in the overtime against the Jets in week 14, Tua had back-to-back tight end screens to Jonnu Smith, who did great yak work, one for 20 yards, the other one for 13. Well, that's 118 passer rating for 2 tight end screens, which again shows you that you got to look just beyond the numbers.
Yeah. Boy.
I startled you there, didn't I, with that 39 mil?
39 million. What a mistake. And it's like teams tell themselves, oh, this is great. You got to keep our guy. And they throw themselves a little parade for it. We kept him. And then within 6 months, the reality sets in like this was the worst decision in franchise history. And we're locked in. It's just, and you see like how Denver had to get rid of Russell Wilson, how Atlanta's going to have to get rid of Kirk Cousins. Like these decisions affect you for years.
Yeah, but this is where I would push back and say, I mean, I wouldn't put Tua in that same category because Tua is a good quarterback. I just don't know where the ceiling is, and I know he's not in that same category of quarterbacks that are in the AFC who basically are also all young.
Yeah.
So it's like the Dolphins are going to be operating at a quarterback disadvantage for a while, which means they need to be better around, and they haven't been. And then particularly if we're going to just point out one position is the offensive line is they've built it to be the 49ers style, which is, the outside zone. So mobile guys who can get to the second level. Well, those guys, generally speaking, are not necessarily very physical. And when the bad weather hits or you play the style of game, as you well know, changes in December, where it becomes more about physicality and all that. And what's the more, physically imposing team, Dolphins aren't there. And then Tua made that comment of like, I get rid of the ball, brother, in terms of concerns about the offensive line's ability to pass block. And that's all great and dandy, but if your receivers are not open, you can't get rid of the ball quickly.
It seems to me when you're making that kind of money as a quarterback, like, quarterback rating is nice. It's fine. Efficiency's good, but you're kind of judged on wins and losses when you're making that much money, because if you're doing the best you can and the team is 5-5 when you start, then it's not working. And they got to change something. And what can they really do? I mean, as long as you're making $55 million a year, the best they can do is sort of tinker around the edges of the roster. I mean, unless they're going to make another blockbuster trade for the next Tyreek Hill, or the Niners are going to make the next blockbuster trade for the next Christian McCaffrey. I don't know. It seems like you're in kind of hoping and wishing territory that the quarterback can all of a sudden put the team on his shoulders. When has Tua ever been that guy?
Not really. Tua's a guy where if through scheme and execution on offense, the guys are where they're supposed to be, will make it work.
And that's what he was in college.
Correct.
He was in college.
He had basically had an all-star team around him, right. Which was part of my concern. When I saw him play in college, I don't see anything that really jumps out at me. I mean, he's just very, very efficient. He's also got
everyone's open
first-round picks around him.
Everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he does a couple of things really, really well. He gets rid of the ball very quickly. He's very accurate, particularly short and intermediate range. But again, if the guys aren't open or the timing's off, he'll make a playoff schedule here and there, but he's not somebody you have to worry about always doing stuff off structure like Patrick Mahomes, like Josh Allen, like Lamar Jackson, those types.
In fact, the Dolphins have to worry about him doing things off structure, because that seems like that's when the bad things happen.
Correct. And again, he did it again last week against Houston. Yeah. Like, dude. And then he talked about 2 weeks before that, he's talking about like he takes responsibility for the Dolphins being 5-7 because he was on IR for 4 weeks because he took on DeMar Hamlin. Mm-hmm. He does the same thing against Houston there. Like, dude, what are you doing?
Dude. Okay, let's get off to it for a second. I want to talk about Mike McDaniel. Mm-hmm. Who's Kyle Shanahan Jr. in a lot of ways. Mini-me.
Quirky Kyle Shanahan.
Quirky Kyle Shanahan. I covered Mike McDaniel for a few years. I really liked him in the sense of he doesn't really give you like that snarky defensiveness that Kyle Shanahan gives you. It seems like he will hang with you and answer your questions. I don't know about critical ones, but at least out here, he was pretty good and he was relatable, I guess. But that's not what I'm asking about. He's struggling as a head coach, at least this year, like Kyle Shanahan is. And my question to you is he a good head coach, Mike McDaniel?
Wow.
Now, I'm not talking play caller. I'm not talking scheme. Is he a good head coach?
You're putting me on the spot here, dude.
I'm going to get you in trouble.
You are going to get me in trouble. And I like Mike also. He's just
I'll make sure that no Dolphins fans watch this or hear this. This is just between us and Niner fans.
Oh, okay. In that case,
yeah.
Can I whisper it? Yeah. I don't know. I have concerns.
Okay.
Extraordinarily relatable to players. Maybe too much so to where I think some of his players, I don't want to say take advantage of it, but maybe the accountability is not quite there.
Same thing happens with the Niners. Kyle is friends with certain players, and those players aren't. Anyway, keep going.
The other issue I have is if we buy the adage, and I do, that teams take on the personality of their head coach. He is a cerebral brainiac who will try to outthink you, outsmart you. And again, that works great in September and October. I don't know how well that works in December and January, where the mode of John Harbaugh, who's more of a gruff, tough guy, Dan Campbell, who will bite kneecaps, I think that generally tends to be more successful. So,
or you even look at a guy like LaFleur, who's running a similar system in Green Bay. I mean, they have a lot of, he can outthink you sometimes, but he also can hand the ball off to Josh Jacobs 30 times in a game and play that way. And the Dolphins can't do that. The Niners can't do that anymore.
They can't do that because, again, I'm, and this is where shame on me. I don't know if the Packers run the outside zone, but it's not.
They do.
Okay, well, the Dolphins, it's not where they don't have. Devon Achane took the league by storm last year, averaged 7.8 yards per carry as a running back, which is completely insane.
Yes.
This year is under 4 yards.
Wow.
And blocking up front's not great. Defenses are filling the gaps better, and then Achane doesn't break any tackles. And for some reason, McDaniel's fallen in love with him, where he's completely hogging all the snaps at running back at the expense of Raheem Mostert, who's coming off a season where he set a team record for rushing touchdowns, total touchdowns, tied Christian McCaffrey for the league in that category. And he's become a complete non-factor. He had 2 costly fumbles after Tua came back, which didn't help. But no, they can't run. They're a bad running team right now, which puts more pressure on Tua. And that goes again with the whole thing of more finesse. And so very, very, very short answer, long. That makes any sense. As the kid would say, maybe he's mid.
Maybe he's mid. In terms of his offense, does it feel like people have caught up to his scheme a little bit? Because for a few years, it looked like he was the most creative coach in the league. I mean, now it looks like it's Ben Johnson or the guy in Tampa. I mean, is he out of ideas, or what are you seeing just in terms of his offense?
Yeah. The one thing I've noticed this season is a lot less motion, and maybe the numbers would prove me totally wrong and, show once again that I have no clue what I'm talking about. But to my untrained eye, it seems I don't see nearly as much motion as we did the past couple of years. I'm not 100% sure why. But I do think there's absolutely something to the fact that now the more exposure opposing defensive minds have to the scheme, the more answers they can come up with, And it hasn't helped. I'm going to be honest, it hasn't helped that Tyreek Hill isn't as lightning fast as he was last year, where it didn't seem to matter whether you had 2 guys on him or 3 guys on him, he was going to get open. And this year,
when you wonder why Achane isn't performing as well anymore, I'm betting that last year and the year before, defensive coordinators were so scared of Tyreek Hill that was their number one concern. And now If he's not as the threat he used to be, you can really sell out to stop that running game, which with all these coaches, their the whole philosophy is run first. They have to set up play action.
Not the Dolphins. There was always
interesting.
No. And
interesting.
Yeah, the first year McDaniel's offense, which really was successful,
it was just drop back.
It was mostly dropbacks, and then McDaniel was kind of bombarded with questions about the running game after the season, and he said, "Well, I think that's one of the things that I wanted to make a concerted effort." I think he relayed that to Mostert actually. Want to make more of a concerted effort to run the ball. Last year, they were, I think, in total yards rushing, they may have been 6th, but they led the league in yards per carry.
But they just have scat backs.
Correct. And they had
which doesn't really feel like you're committed to running whenever every running back's 200 pounds.
The most physical back the Dolphins have is Jeff Wilson. And
he does run hard, but he was better 4 years ago.
Well, he's not, but they parked him on the inactive list pretty much.
Yeah, I mean,
but here's the thing: is they had a really good looking young prospect who they signed as a rookie free agent last year, kid named Chris Brooks out of BYU. They waived him to keep Jeff Wilson. Wilson's on the inactive list every week, and Brooks is now becoming a regular part of the Green Bay Packers rotation. You're going to tell me Chris Brooks shouldn't have been kept over Jeff Wilson? I don't get it.
All right, let me ask you this, because again, these teams look like mirror images. The Niners are going through a very similar season. So from the Dolphins' perspective, they have Tua locked in on the contract. Tyreek, they have a core. Mike McDaniel's part of it. And yet, when they're all together this year, when Tua's playing, they're 5-5.
Mm-hmm.
So, and doesn't seem they're going to make major changes this offseason. It doesn't seem like Mike McDaniel's on the hot seat. So, what are they telling themselves? Why are things going to be like they were 11-4 at one point in 2023? Why are they going to have a bounce back season with the same cast of characters next year?
Because maybe next year we'll get lucky and Tua won't go on IR after the second week. Maybe we can make some tweaks here and there, particularly on the offensive line. Maybe the defense, if Anthony Weaver comes back as defensive coordinator, even though chances are he's going to get some head coach interviews, maybe it'll be even better. I think that's basically what they would be telling themselves as far as why things would improve. That the Tua concussion in week 2 threw everything off kilter, put him behind the 8 ball, and they were 2-4 when he came back. He comes back. They played 2 close games against Arizona and Buffalo, where the offense scores 27 points each time. But in those 2 games, the defense can't get the big stop. They lose both those games by 3 and 1 point, and all of a sudden they're 2-6. But it doesn't address the problem. The biggest problem in the big picture is after they got back to 5-6 with a nice win at the Rams on Monday night, their next 2 big challenges were at Green Bay and at Houston, and it was plop. They flopped. I mean, 27-3 midway through the third quarter against Green Bay was borderline embarrassing, as in, no, you're not ready to compete in those games. And if you can't be competitive on the Thanksgiving night at Green Bay, I mean, you're not a contending team. And then at Houston on last Sunday, defense played lights out. And then the offense was bad. Now, this is where some Dolphin fans will say, well, sure, they didn't have the 2 tackles. Teron Armstead and Kendall Lamb didn't play, so you had to start the rookie second-round pick Patrick Paul left tackle and Jackson Carman, who was a Cincinnati Bengals reject, at right tackle. So that's why no, that's not why they lost, because Tua was pressured 17% of the time per some analytics. He had time. He was bad again against a good opponent on the road in December, which is a pattern.
Well, I just want to point out one more thing. I'm looking at your background, and that's Hard Rock Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting because it's an outdoor stadium.
It is.
But I'm noticing all kind of shade in the upper deck. It looks like there is some sort of a contraption on the roof that allows for it to be open air and yet give people shade at the same time. Is this correct?
Well, I mean, it's
there's a thing.
It's an open roof. There's a hole in the roof. It's like a.
But there's the thing I can see on top. There's something that actually provides shade at the same time for the people so they can live
where the sun is in certain areas, and the shade is going to be. And this is where it becomes a big factor, and where the Miami Dolphins have, I would say, easily the biggest home field advantage in the NFL, when they play September home games in the afternoon, because you see that nice area like you pointed out right back there.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't disappear. Well, that's scorching hot, and that is going to be about 30 degrees, 40 degrees hotter than the Dolphins sideline, which is in the shade.
Interesting. That's games. See, so the Niners they play in Northern California, right, in Silicon Valley, and it's open air, and there's nothing on top, and they just have they don't want to play day games in September because it's so hot and people have literally died of heat stroke. And it's like, and this is South Florida, and they figured it out. And the Niners in Northern California are like, no, I don't think we can put anything on the roof to help these. It's like, Dolphins do it. Just wanted to point it out there. Seems like it works. Seems like it helps. And you can leave a little section to help to hurt the opposing team.
No, absolutely. And then it was mentioned, it was brought up by Buffalo fans in September 2022. The Dolphins played the Bills. It was the third week of the season. Dolphins won 21-19, and Buffalo players were like dehydrating all over the place, barfing up a storm. And it's like, if you've ever done sports in South Florida in the summer, you have even at the recreational level, like my Lord, it's insane. But this is why this year
walking around outside in the summer is incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
But the NFL kind of like eliminated or greatly reduced their home field advantage this year, because outside of Jacksonville in week 1, then they had Buffalo. It was a night game.
Right.
And then they played only one other home game, I think, through October or something.
That's interesting. The Niners are in the same situation. They end up playing a lot of road games or night games early on because of that. But it seems like the Niners don't want to play at home because they don't want the bad press of all the or people just not showing up. But the Dolphins like the home field advantage, and the other teams think it's unfair. It's very interesting. These teams are so similar. So similar. It's going to be fun to watch 2 6-8 teams really square off this weekend in a game that doesn't matter. Who you got winning?
It does matter. The Dolphins still have some playoff hope.
This is about culture and setting the tone for next year. No, the Dolphins aren't as out of it as the Niners are.
No, I know you went through the scenario with me. It's
like, they need a tie. They need a tie, and that's tough.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
No.
Yeah, the Dolphins need some help, and they need to win out, number one. My thing is that the Dolphin defense is coming off a really good game against Houston. They need the game to keep their really, really small playoff hopes alive. I think they're going to shut down Brock Purdy and company, especially since they have Patrick Taylor now as the starting running back because everybody else is injured. But on the flip side is I think because it's a good defense in December, I think the Dolphin offense might have some issues, but I think I have the Dolphins winning a fairly low-scoring game.
It's interesting. I mean, Fred Warner has been playing on a fractured ankle since week 4.
Ooh.
The Niners are almost mathematically eliminated. It's like, can he stop playing football now? Can you sit him down? I don't understand what he needs to prove at this point. He's a future Hall of Famer, but I don't know how the Niners are going to approach this game. It seems like a good time to sit the injured players, but hey, this is for the culture, Alan. I don't know.
But here's the thing: that Dolphins have a similar situation. Doesn't deal with an injury, but they have Calais Campbell, who they were on the verge. Calais Campbell was 38 years old, playing lights out, and damn, that guy's good. What very well might be his last season. Signs with the Dolphins because he thought they had a shot at making a run. They're not. But the Dolphins were getting calls from him. Few teams offered something, apparently, as the story goes, related on the podcast by his brother, who was a former player himself. The Dolphins had a deal with the 49ers to send him there for a 4th-round pick. And then Mike McDaniel stepped in to GM Chris Greer's office and said, you know what, they were 2-6 at the time. I have belief we can make a run with this team. I want to hang on to Calais because he's going to help us get there. The Dolphins
call Mike.
But they did get to 5-6 in his defense. So now the question is, for the Dolphins, the second they get mathematically eliminated from playoff contention, the expectation is they're going to waive Campbell to give him the chance to hook up with a contender. Of course, technically, it could be a scrub team that claims him, but that would be kind of a jerk move. And then Campbell would obviously have the option to just say, you know what, I'm not reporting. I'm going to retire instead.
Final question. This just popped in my head.
Go ahead.
The Niners are probably going to be looking to trade Deebo Samuel this offseason. I'm not sure any team would be interested at this point. Would the Dolphins still be interested in Deebo in a trade?
Not with the money they have sunk into their wide receiver core already. I mean, they're paying. Let me, if I can look it up real quickly here as we talk.
$1 billion to Tyreek, $500 million to Jalen Waddle, essentially.
Something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, and now you got $24 million for Deebo? Probably not.
No, I wouldn't think so. The bigger question in Miami is whether the Dolphins can actually trade Tyreek Hill and what they could get for him. Tyreek's
cap number. Deebo for him.
Yeah, I know how the money would look like. Jalen Waddle's cap number next year actually is very good because it'll be the first year of his new contract. At $8 million.
Deebo for Tyreek, straight up. We can make it happen. No, you don't want Deebo.
How old is Deebo?
The thing about Deebo is he's a really good kick returner at this point in his career.
How old is he?
28. Remember Cordero Patterson?
Yeah.
Essentially.
Well, it's pretty expensive for a kick returner.
Yeah, but hey, you can't put a price on those 30 yards. Sometimes 40.
I think I'll pass.
Thank you very much, Alan. I appreciate this. Hopefully the 49ers Dolphins game will be half as good as this podcast. It's great.
That's a high bar.